Sometimes I think about Fae being a bite-sized version of a mainline Fire Emblem game, given how much more compact everything is. And I'm pretty sure that's exactly what they were doing when the game first came out. Just Fire Emblem, but smaller, and you could bring it around in public, I guess, if you want to do that. Although, given that it's year 8 and it's still constantly being updated with new content and characters, as well as new gimmicks and effects, maybe the mainlines are actually the bite-sized games. Not really, no. I sometimes also think about how adding certain mainline gimmicks into the game would make Fae a lot more crazy, for better or worse. And then I realized I don't really have to think about it because they do it anyway, like all the time. Did you know Celica can teleport across an entire map? Ooh, isn't that fun? It is kind of fun, actually. I really do like it. Did you also know she could reach the subscribe button super easily? Ooh, that was super cringe. Please subscribe. I gotta say, with the addition of Celica Emblem last month, Arena's been pretty annoying lately, and it's because of all the warping effects that everyone could just have now due to the Celica ring. And because it's an obstacle I gotta deal with, it means it's bad, and they're bad for using it. But didn't you summon for Celica and use her and the ring extensively? Aren't you being a hypocrite? Yes. Look, I'm not entirely a hypocrite, because you don't see me doing this, right? Just ignore the 6 Emblem Celica defense that I happen to own. It'll make for good content, I promise. And of course, just to be real for a second, I want to preface that nobody really should be getting any hate to this, even if it's just annoying to deal with in the game. It's not really the fault of any player that takes advantage of the tools that the game directly provides to anybody willing to summon for them. If you're going to take advantage of it, it makes the most sense, because why wouldn't anybody do that? That's just the basics, and you know, that's how you succeed as much as possible and maximize the amount of I guess feathers that you get out of it. However, the actual chads of Arena are the ones that use the super high scoring units and they make their kit obscenely garbage. You know the ones I'm talking about. Maybe you'll have something like a Valentine's Mar with light breath and some other really garbage skills that either she can't use that well or just do not function with her whatsoever, but because they score well enough, they're going to use them anyway. But not because they want to be mean, but they just want to make the life of anybody running into their team way easier. You know who you are, and I thank you for that, because you guys are actually the best. Also, the rare Arena defense teams that, you know, are just emblems of their favorite character, and by emblem, it's like 4 versions of whatever character they really like. I do that personally with mine. And while I was thinking about how I never really wanted to open Arena again, I realized that I need to play Arena for the reward, so instead, I'll talk about those units that I really hate. I love Celica though, she's great. Actually, wonderful character, love her to death.
Celica that I hate. Ready to help.
Although thinking back on it, I realized there was just probably a unit like that for every year of Fae that was just kind of annoying to that extent. At least within the scope of Arena, because if it were any more than that, it would probably be a way longer video than it is right now. But within that general area, I realized that a lot of what they had in common was their threat range, usually being able to get in your face as much as possible with a very high amount of offensive pressure to boot that just made it really difficult to deal with them in a lot of situations if you didn't have a prepared counter for it. I guess the earliest example in which this could really apply would be something as early as Reinhardt and Brave Lynn back in year 1, who had really good reach and good firepower, especially for their times. And because of how little the tools were during that period of Fae, it was definitely not the easiest to deal with, although all of it kind of becomes more relative when you think about it, because you'll have some units that are just really, really good at what they do, and we don't have the tools for it, and maybe like a year later or something, we'll end up getting a lot of these tools that just end up becoming commonplace. And then they keep pushing it more and more with all sorts of new effects and units that it's kind of the same song and dance for the most part, but also the game doesn't really make it too easy in some aspects either. It reminds me of those old Arena maps we used to have that only exasperated the issue, because a lot of them were super awful, to be honest. I was gonna make a video on that eventually anyway, so I'll probably spare a lot of the details just for this video for now, but basically a lot of them were either really good at enabling these types of units or made it really hard to properly deal with them. I think one of the more notorious ones was the bridge map, where it was just you had the 4 units all the way at the top and the 4 units all the way at the bottom, and there was really nothing blocking them, and you could have either like a cav really just run in, or flyers pretty much much do anything they want on the map. Wasn't really a great map, although that one other map with just a bunch of breakable blocks was more annoying than anything else, and also didn't exactly make fighting a lot of these characters too fun at the end of the day. Of course, this didn't apply to every single super dominating threat through pretty much arena history. You could go back as far as something like Surtur, who was just really fat and annoying to deal with. Also, that period of time where you needed the bonus to kill every single foe was like the worst thing ever, and if you're using the Astro trio, especially Anna, it was horrible. It was just completely downright awful, and you probably just could not do it at certain points. But barring that, a good amount of them either did share the ability to have high threat range and good combative purposes, or they had the ability to provide even more range, with something maybe like Legendary Azura, who was also really kind of annoying. I do not miss those days, at least. For a year 2 unit, she was actually really insane and hasn't actually aged all that much in the grand scheme of things. Definitely not the best dancer nowadays, but considering all the other options that we do have, she's definitely one of the better ones that we have lying around currently. Still, the dance itself was extremely good because it granted extra movement to specific archetypes, and that made baiting out some characters a lot harder at times, especially for arena purposes. Also, it was glitched, so it was even stronger than it was being let on. Basically, the glitch allowed her to buff all the stats of an ally she was dancing, even if they didn't have any visible buffs, because the big thing about her is that if they had a visible buff on any stat, she would copy the highest amount of it and then spread it across every stat. But if you gave her a dance seal, then she could still give any unit Spectrum 4 at minimum, and it was hilarious, but also terrifying because it made units even harder to deal with. Although I gotta say, relative to legendaries that made units cover a whole lot of range, Legendary Crumb definitely takes the cake for that, because Gale Force Reposition, even to this day, is still incredibly strong and very useful across all sorts of modes. Him especially, he had armor effectiveness, good attack, he also had penalty neutralization, so at a minimum he was always going to hit a certain amount of attack, which was really frustrating at certain times, because unlike Azura, who you could kind of manipulate with her dance and have her separate from other allies if they get danced and move too far, Crumb definitely felt a lot more difficult to deal with at times, partially because he could move up to 4 spaces under the right circumstance, and then also having the ability to enter combat and having 2 range. He was just a really threatening unit overall, and also I don't miss those days either, but he didn't age too poorly either. I think it's really given due to the fact that he had a Gale Force reposition, and even before his remix, people were using him a lot just because of that. Armor effectiveness is always going to be useful regardless, but even then, the Gale Force reposition was such an incredibly useful asset, on top of the fact that it didn't have a score penalty, meaning that it was just easier to navigate around units comparatively to a lot of other characters that just had to run Rally Plus or anything of the sort. Also, something Tabar, Nacella, Raisin, Leanne, Arena Defense teams that wholly hinged on all 4 of them being 3 movement flyers, so there really wasn't anything that could block them on a map beyond impassable structures, so fun times. But those didn't really last a crazy amount of time comparatively to other types of teams, and it was mostly because they involved legendaries, so I know we had stuff like Fallen Edelgard way back that was kind of annoying because of her good bulk, healing, and Gale Force shenanigans, but I liked her, so that doesn't count. Still, I would definitely say that the units with absurd range and good combat capabilities were always the most annoying to deal with, and looking back on it, it doesn't really surprise me that a lot of the units that fell into that category were some of the stronger units we had during their relative period of time. And in conclusion, actually, is there even a conclusion? I don't even know what point I was trying to make anyway. Oh, right. I don't want to pull for the 400 SP B slot that scores 100 extra SP for some reason. IS, I'm dying out here. Although, there's a good chance it's probably just a skill issue on my end. Also, I realize I have hate in the title, so I gotta be angry or something. If you don't fix this issue, I don't really know if it is one, then I'll still probably play the game because I do like Faye.